This is another piece of independent contextual research that I did throughout the process. This was in the second going into the third week of rehearsals and just coming out of the audition process. I decided to look at marriage in the 1960s, and these are some key points that I made from a website that I looked on. 79% of people over 18 were married in the 60s. That is just over 3/4 of the British population. The average bride was 20 and the average groom was 23, so it was a young marriage. It was seen for women to become mothers and housemakers, so that's why they got married young. Society had this idea that once a woman was married, they would be a housewife and look after the children. Marriage was said to still be based on love. However, when a couple did get married, for the woman, this was a big source of income because usually the women didn't have a job, so the men bringing in the money was their sort of income. In 1960, divorce rate was just 22%. That's under 1/4 of the population. However, after 1967, attitudes changed and the laws around divorce sort of loosened and got more relaxed. Society didn't really think of it as much of a big deal, especially the younger ones anymore. So sort of the idea of divorce wasn't as there wasn't such a stigma around it anymore, and this meant that there were more marital problems, and this became more common, and that was at 1967, which is a year before Made in Dagenham is set. So in terms of what I took from this information was that obviously marriage was for young people because it set the woman up for her sort of lifestyle as a housewife and a mother. I think Rita would have been married young. She's 35 within Dagenham. And she's been married to Eddie for 10 years, so that means that they were 25 when they got married, which is only 5 years over sort of the average bride at the time. So I feel like she was brought up to become that sort of housewife, working mother. Obviously she did end up working, probably because Eddie's income wasn't suitable for the household. They had 2 children. But how this informs my practical work is that the way I now see Rita is more sort of 3-dimensional. She probably had this idea when she was growing up that once she was married, she would get married young, and once she was married, she would become that sort of mother and housewife figure. However, she's now working in a factory, we see in the story. So I think it shows that Rita was a bit different from the social norm, if you could say that. She sort of broke away from that part of it. And also, we mentioned in the research that after 1967 there were more marital problems. I think that we see in the story that even at the beginning, in Busy Woman, when Eddie forgets sort of what's happening on the day and she says, "Go to work, you big lump," she knows that he's forgotten again. So I think, like I mentioned in previous research, there is marital problems underneath what we see. And I think, like I said, just to conclude, that it really shows Rita, I think, is very different from the social norm, and she likes to break away from tradition, because although she did get married young, she became a working mother. She, did 2 things at the same time, was a mother and a housewife, but also went to work in the factory. This research and practice, I would say that this shows in some still images that I have from the first few days of setting Act 1, in terms of the way that we see Rita and Eddie's marriage is very different. In I'm Sorry, I Love You, which we started to set, Rita is very sort of uptight and tries not to make eye contact with him and is very sort of rigid, because we start to see their marital problems, which sort of after 1967 began to develop. So I think we see that they're sort of not afraid to show that they have marital problems. Rita, not as much. She's trying to push him away and not make it obvious. So I will upload any videos of early rehearsals of I'm Sorry, I Love You and some pictures from that.